Good morning. I'm just welcoming everybody to the Shoreline Management Plan Committee meeting and workshop for the we have some people in the room, and I believe Paul Venturi, our co-chair, is with us.
Kia ora, Mayor.
Kia ora, Paul. Lovely to have you with us.
Hi, Hoki.
Pretty busy.
Oh, everyone's busy.
Yeah. So, and Terry, welcome aboard. Who else is on?
Good afternoon. How are you all?
Jeff Garden, the consultant.
Uncle Sam, who else is there? Terry and okay. So I think we'll just start today's meeting. Are there any apologies? I believe Joe and David were going to be joining us, but we'll take their apologies nonetheless, just in case they can't make it.
Oh, kia ora, Mayor. Could we just, before we start, could we ask John to open for us, please?
Certainly. Apology. Thank you, John. Appreciate that.
I think he speaks English too, like, if I could tell me out there, what I am, we have a cafe, it's a total way with a kilo, here we are starting fun and we are not looking at we better. I found a tiny way and then look at the pony, but you know, the door, but yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay, to go for all, I'll continue. Amen.
Kia ora, John. Tēnā koe te rangatira tūwhira tō tātou hui, kautoko ngā mihi whakawhetai ki te rongoraua, nau rā te rawhata ki aia, tēnā anō. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Paul. I would have preferred here if you were here. It's a bit odd with doing Zoom. My apologies, I'm not used to it this way in a shared context. I'll get better. Isaac, not on here. Do we have a mover? The Robin, seconder, Tony, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Are there any items not on the agenda? There being none. Any conflicts of interest? There being none. Now we're at 2.1, but in recognition of a request that I had from Terry and he. Oh, sorry. I'll skip it. Rightio. Do I have minutes for confirmation? Do I have a mover? Yeah. Robin, Secretary Tony, any discussion? There be none. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. So 2.1 is the next item, but Terry asked if we could address 2.4, which is the regional council request in regard to having a member on the committee. And so I'll just ask if you could look to 2.4. 2.4. So that the resolution is that we received the Regional Council participation on the Management Plan Committee report, and the committee is invited to consider whether a government representative is invited onto the committee, which would change the structure of the committee. So what would members like to do?
Can I just put a motion that we accept those conditions and invite Regional Councillor Mr. Dennis Teague to join the meeting?
So it changes the structure of the meeting, Terry, and so at this stage, this is our first co-governance committee arrangements between council and local iwi. So my preferred position would be that the committee retains the integrity of that co-governance structure as its first co-governance structure, and and not invite any further changes to the committee structure for this term. Do I have a second?
If I could speak to that, my plea is for
I move that
the regional council. We have to give effect to the regional council's policies and legislation. They should be on this journey together with us. This is a joint journey. Even at the end of this journey, we still have to give effect to their plans and procedures. They don't have to give effect to ours. So it's really important that they are part of this journey with us. So why not include them now and be part of the journey and incorporate their thoughts and ideas into our plans, because we're going to have to get them to adopt it when we go forward. That's what I'm asking the committee to consider.
So I already moved a motion, and that's your response. Do I have a second to my motion?
Yeah, I'm having a second that.
Tony seconded my motion. If you'll see, Kerry, in the report and in the paperwork that there is strong representation from the regional council at the technical level. Are there any further discussion?
Kia ora, Mayor. Could I ask, speaking to the point you've raised, which is a fair one insofar as the structural integrity, and I certainly get what Terry is saying in terms of the legislative regime, and quite right to say in terms of at the more, I can put it this way, the more formal stages when it comes to plans and policies, the RMA is clear on that. My understanding is that this process and the instruments we're looking at are not the formal RMA side of it. That's going to be some of the follow-on steps. So there's a few moving parts here. I'd just be keen to understand, I can't see Amon, I think he's to the left of my screen. Whether it's Amon or whoever, I'd just be interested in the management view on this in terms of, given the amount of time and effort that's gone into the structural establishment and the number of meetings that have occurred in that local context, the pros and cons of what's being put to us in terms of somewhere down the track, the potential for the changes and the implications of that.
Thank you, Paul. The first thing I want to acknowledge is just the work that at a staff level WRC are contributing, and Waka Kotahi as well. So I think that project team needs to be working well and well resourced. In terms of going forward, I also recognise that what we're doing will influence Waka Kotahi and WRC, but that's probably all I can kind of comment on in regards to where we go, unless there was anything specific you wanted me to answer.
No, that's helpful, Eamon, and actually that's a very good point that reminds me, and that is, it's not as though the region don't have a face, as it were, in this process because of, as you say, at that technical and management level. So we do have those linkages, if you like, from that. So that's helpful for my thinking. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the committee? John?
Okay, again, endorsed our last meeting, and that this is the first governance group that we've had, and I think that it's imperative that we get that down and be mindful that we have other agencies that we will feed into, and that they will feed into us in time. So I support your position for that reason.
Okay, are there any further comments? Then none, then I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
I'm against.
John? Right, so it's carried. Thank you. So we're declining to change the structure at this stage. So thank you. Yeah.
Oh, what the hell happened there?
Oh, sorry, I don't know that buttons up to the vote feed. So that takes us back to 2.1, which is, thank you very much, Paul, and Kerry, 2 and Sean, that takes us back to 2.1, which is the Shoreline Management Plan update, project update. So thank you. It's
So no presentation on this, no presentations from me today, but I would like to just highlight that we're up to the stage of talking about options with the coastal panels. So we've had 3 meetings already this week, and we've got the Thames meeting tomorrow. So that's good. It's the first of 3 sessions that we'll be talking to them. So July and August, the next ones, and then in September would go out for wider public consultation. So at that point, ideally, we'll have preferred options from the coastal panel, and then in September would go and talk more broadly with the community. So that's good, and at the moment we're still on track to completing the project in April. One thing to just mention is in terms of information flow, some of the information and technical work we're doing will end up going to the coastal panel quite directly and may not come via this committee. That's in part because of the need to finish in April, and it is appropriate, I think, for it to happen that way. The other thing that the report includes is just for information, really, the submission to the LTP, and if there was any questions on that submission, happy to take those or to leave it at that.
So I'd note that page 15, you're talking about the preparation of a floor level practice note, and the government put out some guidelines on that. And if it's been researched and established on empirical tidal data that the tide will actually only rise 125 millimetres per year, which will take 800 years to get to 1 metre, what's the floor level that we're looking to do a practice note on?
Probably the first thing around the practice note is the complications around different legislation. So there's both an RMA and a building code practice. So when you're wanting to get consistency of advice, the practice note is intended to address that confusion sometimes. So when someone comes in and asks, how do I set my floor level? If we're able to give them a practice note that navigates them through. How do
the government guidelines fit into that?
The government guidelines, the practice note links to government guidelines. It doesn't set floor levels in particular areas. So it gives you a formula about you need to account for this flood level, or if you're in a river area, you also need to look at river flooding, but it doesn't give you a final floor level necessarily.
So what's their current floor level?
It will vary all over the district.
Okay, thank you. So if it varies all over the district, how are you going to have a practice note?
Well, for example, if you live in or looking to build somewhere in this area, the practice note would say, are you in an area that could be affected by a river? And you tick the box and say, yes, therefore, follow this path to understand the flood level from a river. Is it in the coastal hazard zone? And we may be able to...
Okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? Further questions? John? No. Anybody online? Terry?
Yeah, I just can understand where Amon's coming from there. We'll be directed by the government's requirements to build within a certain codes for certain sea level rise, and we have to follow those codes. So this will be a way of sort of identifying those issues as they arrive, rather than having a contentious, like we do with Linky Holmes drama after it happens. So yeah, I support what's going on here.
Radio. Okay, any further questions? There being none, so we just move to I'll move the resolution that we receive the update, the Shoreline Management Plan project update.
Second.
Seconded Tony, all those in favour, any discussion? There's been none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Right, so now we're on to the next item, which is 2.2, presenting to the Regional Transport Committee.
So throughout the process and working with Waka Kotahi, they've highlighted the need to raise awareness of the project with the Regional Transport Committee. They suggested a presentation early on or soon to raise that awareness, and then go back at a later date when we may have some more firm recommendations that they could pick up on. So that's the approach they're looking to take, and just seeking endorsement of that approach, really.
Okay, any questions? There being none, then we're moving on to. Well,
I make a move then.
you like to read the recommendation?
No.
Receives it and then.
Sorry, so I'm actually doing a question about this. So you present it to the Regional Transport Committee and then what? Then they'll know?
Yeah, to start with, then they'll know, and then when they're considering priorities, either short or long term, they're aware of them. Raising awareness has proved benefit already. There's different aspects of Waka Kotahi that are coming to investigate the state highway, so that awareness there's value in that by itself, but also the fact that our solutions are likely to be tied up with how the road's managed or built in the future. So if we're recommending roads form part of that solution, we need to be working with both Waka Kotahi and the Regional Transport Committee.
So do we need to make a presentation, or do we just have council's road and transport representative to do that? Who's on?
So I can talk about
Okay.
So it's sort of what Adam's saying. So I can let you know that Waka Kotahi and the Regional Transport Committee are well aware of our issues, and in every meeting I go to, resilience is the word that is bandied around, and that is in terms of our road network, which is primarily coastal, and of course with weather, it has slipped to other things that close us down. So that is very high on the list of priorities of issues, I should say. And so we've spoken before about some of the solutions might be simply raising road levels as opposed to doing something else, and that could serve as a controlled stop bank as well as looking at inundation. So those sort of things are on the agenda, but they are in very early stages. And it was interesting, every meeting I was at the Hamilton the other night, it had nothing to do with them. It was about transportation in the Greater Waikato. And that got raised, and when I talked to David Spears, and Amon used to work for him in another life, they talk about it all the time, and it helps that he's probably in the air, and he is very conversant with our issues. So, yeah, I think it's top of mind, and so just watch the space.
Yeah.
I guess where I'm thinking about from this is that, you know, the time the project team can put into presentation is quite precious time that they can be doing else, you know, we're under time pressure, I believe. And so if Waka Kotahi are already in the working group as our regional council, and we've got our representative on that committee sitting here in this committee with us, I did wonder about the value of chucking another brick on the fire to say, you know, let's talk about this again. So that's where I'm wondering about this.
I think it's got a little space to go.
Things that already happen.
The work that Amon, around the stuff that Amon's doing now, which I think is important now, is now looking at, we know where the hot points are, and we're now looking at what are some mitigation available to us, and a whole range of things that come out of those meetings, which is interesting. So I think when we get to the end of that, and aim on sit and sound, get their team, get that report put together, that will highlight what we think are the preferred options to mitigate, and the ones that have anything to do with a road network will then go back through the Regional Transport Committee for their work, and obviously then to Waka because not available instead of funding. So I just think we've got a little bit of space to go yet before we're in a position to get them to come back and say, we hear what you say, here goes what our experts are offering up, and maybe where we see the priorities and where we see we can use some funding. So I just think that work's probably maybe 6 months away, and that's
Just maybe this resolution is just too premature.
Yeah. Point well made, and you're right, and Tony, yeah. So do you want to move to the first resolution?
Yeah.
And
we could, yeah, that's.
And just leave the second.
In 6 months time, or we could, if we wanted to, we could say it's made to them next year or.
I could work with Tony on how and when to present that, and whether it needs extra resource from council to go over, whether Tony can't just do that, which he probably has been doing anyway. So, okay,
So I'm happy to do, resolution 1, I'm happy to do that. And then
second that.
awesome. So the resolution is that we just received the report. So we're going to let the second resolution lapse.
It's would be appropriate to say at the conclusion of the SNP work that's been done now, so there's only one more meeting, 10 to go tomorrow. Once that's done, that round of meetings is over, and the team will go away and read the new stage, and during that they'll be in a position to present our answers to the Regional Transport Committee. Would that be right, Al?
Yes, I'm picking up two things. One we could now, how we're going, what we've found, but we're not at the solution stage.
Correct.
So we could perhaps park that and wait till probably the end of the calendar year, and at that point would have better information to share with them. So I think there's those two options, and I think what you're suggesting is the second one in terms of waiting.
That's right.
Yes, well, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well. John, you happy with that? Yeah, sounds sensible. Anybody online have any comments? There being none. So we'll move the first resolution, which is receive the report. Moved Robin, seconded Tony. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. So we're now on to 2.3, which is target iwi and kapu consultation. And of course it was interesting to note some of the vulnerable areas, the Urupana, Kawatapu Bay, Aputari, Otahu Estuary and Kennedy Bay, and also potentially some parts of the Nile, of the river. But so yes, consultation.
So I suppose from working through the process with the coastal panels, we're at a point where occasionally we'll get to a geographical place, and panel members will say, well, we're not equipped to be able to advise or decide on that area because we don't think we know what's important. We recognise that we heard that this is Māori land or has taonga that's important. Let's move on. So that's the challenge that we've got. So there's a couple of ways to deal with it potentially, and that's what we're looking for feedback on. In those isolated areas, we could go out and try and understand who's most affected and have individual consultation with the affected parties for that specific area. So that's one thing we're considering doing, and it may be appropriate in some places. And then the other thing just to note is that the door is still open, I suppose, in terms of having representation on the coastal panels themselves. So just looking for feedback on what might be the better approach for those challenging areas?
Well, the lessons I've learned is that that it's best to go and talk with them directly and ask them what they would prefer. And so, and that I think is the first step. And that means you've got to go out to each and every one of the different communities that potentially, like go to Kokotaki and talk to the locals there and see what it is, that the format that they'd like. Manaia, I'm not, so is it Ngāti Pū for Otahu Estuary, Anyamana, I'm not sure. But John, do you have any input for this about how we should go about this?
I think disseminate the information out to all of the Taiwiwi. They're not geographically located in particular areas.
Yeah.
So get the coordinator information out to them. You'll have information online as to who the contact people are. And you know all the marae, contact all of the marae people. They have networks out to our people across the whole way. So utilise all those resources as best as they can. I think it's appropriate that you do that. The more so that we are going into treaty settlements and they'll be looking at developing some of these land plots that are susceptible to inundation. So yeah, cast them in as well as you can.
Yep.
That would be what I'd say.
Kokotaki?
Yeah, you go and talk to the farmers there.
Yeah, I think you have to go directly there. No, it's not a marae as such. So they started to have a little bit of a community building on the right as you're going north.
Yeah, go and have a talk to them.
Sorry, Tony.
Just what John just said, so from what I've been listening to up till now, and I understand the ability to get area representation to any one of these panels.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard, a lot of these issues, the places of significance that are actually known to people on these panels, and they're wide representing people, you know, some people potentially might know someone else doesn't know.
Yeah.
So when this work is all summarised, most of those places of significance will probably be recognised that we know about. But what John said, if that then, in a summarised form, goes back to iwi groups, they'll be able to go cast their eyes over it and say, no, you're 100% right, you've got every one of them, and we're on the right track. Or they'll say, no, that we've got 2 or 3 others or whatever, and come back and visit at that time. Because if we try and do it all in one go, we'll never get to the end of the process. So I think it'd be helpful for iwi, in my mind, that the work that is being done, being mindful that there are members of varying iwi on these coastal panels anyhow in an informal way. I think that will help the process.
Agreed.
Tony is going around to all the coastal panel meetings.
Yes.
Which is really fantastic. So
It was hard this week. Lots of patience.
This week has been easy.
you don't need to worry. So communicate. Anybody else got any comment they want to contribute for this one?
I
just made comment around, and I can hear what John's saying and Tony. I thought at the last meeting there was a sort of desire to keep this at this level, the iwi engagement at this level, and not drop down below that. Is that changed, or is that factual? I thought at the last meeting when Joe and Paul were talking, they were talking about keeping it at this high level, the engagement.
I wasn't at the last meeting.
Oh, sorry, who was it? Joe and somebody else. Anyway, if that's not the case, that's fine. I just thought that was one of the discussions we had then, but if that's not the case, no trouble to continue.
What I think is really important is to listen to what John's saying about engaging with the trial iwi, contacting the marae, but wherever possible, making that contact person to person and establishing the interaction person to person about how that can be expanded for that particular area. The coastal panel setup may not quite work, so.
Kia ora, Mayor.
So if
You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add to the corridor and support fully what John has said and what the group and especially Amon, who's been at the forefront of this, trying to reach out in these ways. I think it is belts and braces. So to the 12, to the marae, I think also to the where there are these, to the iwi officers, and there are a number of them. And that way we're getting a good coverage. And at these various levels in these different ways, I think is the approach that's going to get us the best outcomes. Also take the point that when we get to the summaries, that's another vehicle or another means by which we can get the information out there. So it's and rather than or. And I know that's been the approach that the council team has been trying to take, one of inclusivity. So appreciate those ongoing efforts to bring people into this.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, we're doing our very, very best. And it's quite an important one. So thank you so much. So where are we going to from here? What would you like from here? Target consultation. Yeah, right. I'm happy to move the resolution. I think both are, and you were taking the points on board for the second resolution, which is to undertake the targeted consultation.
But also to cast the net wide.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know here.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul. So any further discussion? There being none, all those in favour, please say aye.
Right.
Yes, carried. So we've now got two more. We've done that one. 2.4 we've done. So on to council. Let's start. We've done it. Members' reports. Huh? And then we've got members' reports and then to a workshop. So that after members' reports, that concludes the formal part of the agenda. So members' reports, Tony.
Well, my thing to reiterate what I said earlier, but to recognise the effort that these representation of these groups are putting in. The work, if you haven't dialed one of these or been one, these are a significant group of people in the community, all lay people, doing some fantastic work. Like some of the work these people, when you sit down and see what these people are doing and their knowledge of their own areas and the positive input they're putting in, it's a very pretty special place to be. And so it's not right now, but at some stage, is how do we recognise these people? Because we on our own would never get there. We'd never ever get users without this help. And I've just been amazed at the detail and knowledge that these folk have within the fourth generation family in the area. Probably come to a lot of history, and but it's positive, and it's not a change people knocking our organisation around or people in the organisation around. It's actually people actually trying to help us get them in, and so I'm sort of humbled fish every time I sit on these meetings to see the work that these people do. So I just whether that be recorded or not, I don't know, but I can tell you it's pretty important.
But you can ask for a recorded formal thanks to all of the coastal panel and participants and technical advisory group from Tony Fox.
Well,
Yeah.
us, it's very, very good.
Supported by the rest of the committee. So
It's progress on, it's I said in the early meeting, this thing started up pretty unworldly. There's a whole lot of people with enthusiasm wanted to get into it, and they wanted to provide the solution on day one. Well, it's coming down this funnel now, and it's getting into the skinny part of the funnel. And so it's been interesting to see the evolution of this, and as it's got more focused, so the benefits have been greater than we'd expect that probably, but it's a very, very good process that the team have got in place, and I think we're going to get a good result at the end of it. So long way to be waiting to last.
thank you, Tony. John? You're Terry?
I'm fine, thank you.
Paul?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And the only thing I have to report is the deputy mayor out there clearing a drain with pitchforks this morning. Garden fork to help clear the water away off the road so that they wouldn't have one lane traffic. So that's to be commended. We're just a hands-on council. So look, thank you. I'll just put to a mover for the report. Robert, second. Tony. Well, I would actually.
Yeah.
Tony had the.
Yeah, no.
All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
That closes the meeting. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being able to sign in. Thank you.